Warm welcome to our new normal video series. Today we're going to focus on the huge challenges created by what I think we can all say with certainty is a huge, challenging property insurance market. You know, this will be for many, I hope, a welcome shift away from talking about COVID-19. Now, as we discussed in our previous video sessions, we're living through a period of unprecedented change. The consumer landscape has changed fundamentally. Now, businesses across the retail, food, beverage and leisure industries have to adapt to thrive and survive. Organisations require new approaches and solutions to manage the opportunities and risks created by what we call the new normal. And we explored these challenges in previous videos. And today we're going to pivot away from focusing purely on COVID-19, cue sigh of relief, and we're going to look into the challenges created by what I describe as generational change within the insurance industry. Yes, we know the insurance industry started changing probably about 18 months ago, and this has accelerated particularly during the last 10 months. Now, there's a major supply and demand imbalance across key policy lines, featuring price hardening, coverage restrictions, and whilst another key change is the need to provide ever more detailed underwriting information. Now, one of the biggest spike changes is within the property market. This has occurred at exactly the wrong time for retail, food, beverage, and leisure firms, many of whom are fighting for survival. You know, securing property and business interruption at acceptable pricing levels and limits is a huge challenge for many businesses across these highly stressed industry sectors. I'm delighted to welcome Clarissa Franks today to discuss the features of this market and, importantly, solutions, tools and tips to help mitigate these challenges. Clarissa is Marsh UK's placement leader for our risk management business and brings a wealth of property and casualty expertise to this new normal video series. So Clarissa, you know, what do you see as being the real key features that have led to these property market restrictions?
Thanks, David. So the key features that have led to the changes in the market, I mean, the market's been moving for sort of markedly for 12 months, maybe slightly longer. The property market rating is based on two key areas, really. So natural catastrophe losses and then man-made fire losses. And I think it's fair to say that underwriters have underestimated the underlying exposure for both natural catastrophe and the propensity for major fire losses. The latter for this industry, for retail, food and beverage, it is particularly relevant actually, because generally in the UK and in Europe, construction standards for food manufacturing and beverage and retail food storage tend to be slightly lower than that of the US. And there has been a trend of major fire losses, particularly in food production, that has created a problem in the market. The major change in the property market, though, globally is due to natural catastrophe, where significant individual losses impact every single insurer and multiple insureds. And so you can point to things like the hurricanes in 2017, which I guess if you're a UK retailer, you sort of question the extent to which that should have an impact on your insurance program. But the truth is most global insurers are working in different territories or insuring those exposures from the UK. The other thing is a slightly more emerging problem, and so it's not high hazard natural catastrophe, but actually what we call secondary perils. And that means things like unanticipated flooding, wildfires, tornadoes, so smaller scale, almost attritional natural catastrophe losses that basically insurers haven't really modelled or charged for, that are forming a significant part of losses each year. And in the UK, the obvious one is UK flood. And I think sort of 2 or 3 years ago, it was mentioned, but was never really a driver for pricing or capacity. That has definitely changed. And I guess insurers' awareness for the potential impact of climate change in the UK is becoming more obvious. So a long answer, But really the answer is insurers haven't made money because they've underestimated what the underlying exposure is.
Thanks, Carissa. And yeah, I guess, businesses really are struggling to understand how this has kind of come about. It's something that many businesses are unaccustomed to talking about, is a property insurance increase. I guess we've had sort of 15 years of year-on-year decline. So, it's a big pivot for businesses to get their head around why that's changed. So it's good to get some, a perspective on why that pricing is starting to firm up. I know you and I, share these frustrations, massive frustrations that clients have as they grapple with these changes. And I think we all agree we're now in the realms of trying to mitigate some of these challenges. So what are your sort of top tips, your top mitigation tips, if you like?
My top mitigation tips are all to do with risk differentiation, and also, and the key part of that for this industry is risk management. And so I mentioned already an awareness. It's a factual matter that building regulations in the UK and Europe do not require sprinkler protection, and in food and retail, there are often then either refrigerated or areas that use combustible panels for construction. Those two things are huge in terms of being able to get the best out of the market. So whether or not significant capex is planned to install sprinklers, and I'm not suggesting that that is the route that most clients are going at all, but what are you doing in terms of risk management in the absence of sprinkler protection? What are you doing on panel inspections? How are you dealing with hot works? What are the other mitigating factors when it comes to controlling potential fire exposure? That really, being able to tell that story and provide technical insights to what you're doing across your key manufacturing or key distribution centres is one of the most important things, I think, in being able to get the best out of the market.
Sure, and I guess we've talked about this many times before, but in essence, you're referencing building a narrative, and it's building a story about the client to try and differentiate them, as you say, from the pack. And it's also, I guess, about supporting underwriters to build a case internally. What would you say? And also a go-to-market strategy. From that go-to-market strategy, what are the best ways that, how do you arm yourself to kind of take more control over the market?
So, I mean, I say this every single time I talk to clients, and in terms of top tips, but the market is in a challenging place at the moment. Insurers are under-resourced. Everything is taking a long time. And so the authority that an individual underwriter has to release terms in broad terms has gone or has been severely restricted. So there's a bottleneck in addition to the resource issue. So underwriters are too busy. They're having to refer every single account to underwriting management, which tends to be one person. And so if you don't start the process early, you end up in this kind of stopcock issue where you're running out of time, and then you end up in a kind of take it or leave it situation. And you talk about frustration with the market. I've definitely seen some really tactical moves from underwriters in terms of using the time as we come up to a renewal date when it is a take it or leave it in terms of how the terms are set. So using time and getting in the market early. Don't just think about a renewal cycle as being, let's start 6 months out. It's a constant process. You can have a conversation with an underwriter or your relationship person at an insurer at any point in the year. You can have presentations from risk engineers to the insurance market at any point in the year. It doesn't need to just be focused on the key at the key point in terms of the renewal date. And so I'd advise people to really make use of all of the time in the year to make sure that insurers understand what it is you're doing and building that narrative, as you said.
I guess we're also in this environment, we're trying to befriend, the underwriter and to try and make their life easier. and we know they've got to go through a really convoluted process internally to get sign off for terms. So if you're looking to differentiate yourself and make that underwriter's life easier, then that's got to have an advantageous outcome, I guess. So is there anything you can do from an information and approach perspective that we can kind of do to support the underwriter?
Yeah, so I did an interview with one of our major market CEOs a few weeks ago and pushed him on this point, you know, what makes a difference? And he was pretty candid. And one of the things he said makes a difference is likability. And so, yeah, building a relationship with underwriters, making things easier for them in terms of getting them what they need so they've got some really good insights is very important. And I think it does make a difference. Getting information right first time round is a big thing. And it kind of leads into my point about managing the timeline, because you can get in the market early, but if in fact your gross profit declaration is incorrect, then we're then having to rework, and it raises more questions. I think being able to provide detailed information, so underwriters take our normal schedule of values with addresses and they put it into a model which requires them to geocode it to give latitude and longitude details. So the better the postcode, or ideally having those geocode details, underwriters can just take that information and immediately put it into their model. You're taking out the time for them to do manual work. In addition, all of the surveys that we get from insurers, and they all have risk recommendations on them. Having a one-page or an overview spreadsheet of the progress of risk recommendation suggestions is a really good way to really neatly capture for an underwriter what you've done during the year and how they should be viewing the risk when they're underwriting the renewal.
Yeah, and that's really great insight, because I guess, you know, we need to be arming our clients and also our teams internally to grab that information and make sure, as you say, it's right first time, there are good snapshot summaries, and it's all about supporting that underwriter to make his case internally. And you don't want to end up, pardon the pun, smoking time. His time kind of reworking information. You want to use his time to build the case to deliver the best result for the client. Also in the market, I think something highly topical at the moment is reinsurance, and we're hearing, you know, how the reinsurance market is shaping the kind of the front end market. You know, could you just give us a little bit of insight on how that's occurring?
Yeah. Okay. So reinsurance takes two key forms that we should be worried about. Facultative reinsurance, which is reinsurance that insurers buy on an individual risk or an individual location, potentially for an individual peril that concerns them. And so that is, you will find that many direct insurers will also write facultative reinsurers for their competitors and peers. So that market is similar to the direct insurance market. There is some overlap, but it's primarily driven by Lloyd's and some slightly more esoteric carriers in the UK. It's a bit more of a global market, and so there's also facultative reinsurance capacity in Europe and Bermuda and other hubs. The other type of reinsurance is treaty reinsurance, which is purchased by insurers on a portfolio basis, on an event basis, and can be purchased on multiple lines or for an individual class of business. And for property, most treaty reinsurance placements are for kind of all risks, so fire and all of the traditional perils, and then there are also natural catastrophe treaties, and sometimes they can also be combined. So the facultative reinsurance market is the area that has been one of the early drivers of the property market transitioning, not the treaty market yet, and I'll come on to that. In the end of 2018, Lloyd's started what they called the Decile 10 review, which focused on the lowest decile, the bottom 10% of Lloyd's syndicates in terms of underwriting performance. And at that point, that was just after the hurricane season in 2017, at that point, it became evident that compared to the the reserves and the profitability at Lloyd's following Hurricane Katrina, notwithstanding the fact that if you strip out natural catastrophe losses, the fact is those Lloyd's syndicates were not making money writing property, and they couldn't just blame a large hurricane season. And so it meant that a number of syndicates either withdrew capacity or stopped underwriting completely. And then suddenly that cheap capacity that insurers were buying on individual placements had gone, or the price had gone up significantly. And I guess in theory that wouldn't have mattered if insurers had just been using it to maybe deal with individual issues that didn't suit their own underwriting appetite. But they weren't using facultative reinsurance in that way. They were using it much more shrewdly, and they were just buying it because it was cheap. And so their own capacity was more expensive, and the alternative facultative capacity also suddenly became more expensive. And that's why, particularly, food again is an area where most insurers bought quite a lot of facultative reinsurance, probably at a primary level, in order to support very low deductibles that insurers themselves had no appetite for. And that's why there's been a fairly marked change in terms of deductible and pricing for primary level, higher hazard food and beverage production. The treaty reinsurance market's a different story. That's been actually fairly soft for a while. And we haven't talked about it lots as a result. That's times are changing. And in July, there were signs of double-digit rate increases on treaty. The 1st of January is the major treaty renewal season globally. And the predictions are there, that we will be in a double-digit rate increase environment on property treaty. And so just to put that into context, the average rate increases for property treaty in January of this year, so January 2020, were between up 6 to 7%. And direct property rates are now in Q3 on our numbers up 25%. If the prediction for the 1st of January 2021 treaty renewals are 15 to 20%, you can kind of extrapolate out what impact that might start to have on the direct property market, because insurers will not absorb that cost. There isn't enough margin for them to do so, basically.
Yeah, so it's I guess we're approaching another pivotal moment as we kind of shoot this video, approaching the end of Q4. That reinsurance market really is going to drive, I guess, appetite and pricing throughout 2021. So it's pivotal. We get our stories right now with carriers and clients, and we really approach the market hard, because I guess kind of crystal ball moment now, we're anticipating, as you said, further price hardening or price correction, primarily driven by that reinsurance capacity. So, crystal ball moment for us, how long do you think this is going to go on for? Do you have a view yet as to kind of the outline for 21 and beyond?
Our prediction is that 2021 is going to be, if not as challenging, a more challenging year for property. And you're right, the reinsurance cost is a line, is a kind of key trigger point that we're looking at. However, the underlying issue of insurer profitability is still there. And we haven't talked about COVID. And, from a property perspective, there's a way to go in different territories in terms of to what extent there are claims that are going to be covered. But in an environment where insurers were nearly making money or just about, it is another, consideration in terms of the way in which 2020 has performed. So it's there, but it's not an individual driving factor. I think the interesting thing is you have to think about insurer shareholders, right? And insurance as an investment category hasn't been that appealing. And 2020 is going, the story doesn't improve. So in terms of insurers becoming and answering to their shareholders and getting more investor interest and increasing share price, I think there's some way to go basically before that starts to shift and before we get what we really need, which is new insurers coming into the market, new capital generation, because it is to some extent a commodity, right? And so you need more supply. And until we get that, and the only reason you'll get more supply is if, from an investment perspective, it's a really appealing class to get into, compared to other potential uses of capital. And so, yeah, I think 2020 is going to be pretty tough going. I think if 2021, I think if 2021 is a calm and benign year from a natural catastrophe perspective, I would hope and expect that insurers in 2021 would be able to deliver some pretty good results in terms of return on equity for shareholders. And I'd expect then that we'd start to see some more influxes of new capacity, and we'll start having some more options.
And let's really hope that is the case, because then we can see our favourite word for the cycle come back in. As you say, capacity comes in, the supply and demand imbalance starts to kind of get redressed slightly.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is, like, there are various charts on the market cycle, and the soft market cycle that we had been going on for 10 to 15 years. And so now we have 24 months, and then we would expect a soft market cycle to last a lot longer. So yeah, once it gets there, it would be reasonable to then predict that it should be much more stable for a while.
I guess another interesting one is if, I guess long-term agreements are a real scarcity at the moment, but, if one's offered up, what would your view be on whether a client should be taking that right now?
I mean, devil's in the detail, right, as to what it says. If it's a single-digit rate increase, I would take it.
Right. Okay. That's a pretty stark, pretty stark directional, piece of advice there. So I guess, we'll have to read into that you're seeing, as you said, a real tough market again, 21 and beyond, probably.
Yeah.
So thank you, Chris. I think that's been a really eye-opening discussion. There's real valuable insight there, and I hope businesses take value from that. And as you say, it's really all about mitigating the market challenge. And I especially like that angle of understanding the underwriting process and how we can support underwriters to build a case to deliver a better result for our clients and do something different for our clients. So in the next video, we're going to explore how best to navigate through the challenges created by this generational change, but a different dynamic. In the next video, we're going to focus on the directors and officers market. And it's probably fair to say that market is even more stressed than the property market. So lots of interesting things to discuss there. So in the meantime, take care, stay safe, and we look forward to welcoming you back.